to Mark. So there you are. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. And again, I'm not seeing many people on video, but I would like to ask you to come on to video so I can see you. It'll make my energy, I think, and my embodiment a little bit more present in the moment. It's easier to do that than speak to some black squares on a screen, which we're all kind of getting used to these days. Um, so yeah, there will be, as they say, audience participation. And hopefully we will have time for interaction. It may not be verbal interaction, but I'm going to talk you through a few slides. For those of you who like kind of new models and concepts, I will certainly share some kind of, my perfected, I hope, strategic decision-making process. And of course, the very title suggests we will be bringing the body into this conversation. And I will be using my body, and hopefully you will be using yours a little bit, and we can experiment and see what you get out of this next hour. So let me share my screen if I can, and hold on. This worked fine in our test mode. So far, so good. Is that good, Andrina?
You're good.
Great, great. So actually, that image of it's a sculpture actually that you can see on that slide is a sculpture of Anthony Gormley. It's in the UK, and it is
Your call has been forwarded to an automated voice.
interruption of the social field.
8015230 is not available.
Anybody want to leave a message? And you can see that body is a little bit pixelated in that sculpture. And often we feel a little bit like that, particularly when we're going from one Zoom meeting to a Teams meeting to a Google Meets meeting, etc. So what I'm going to ask you to do, I think it's around lunchtime where you are, it certainly is where I am. You probably came in, and as Andrina said, you were busy up till a minute before you came on the call. So I'm going to ask you just to take a minute to sit up straight, feet flat on the ground, or as flat on the ground as you possibly make them, and take your back off the chair, and then just feel your weight sitting in the chair and with your feet on the ground. And then I'm going to ask you just to put your hands kind of on your thighs or on your knees, relaxed. Close your eyes, and we'll just take a minute to breathe. So take some deep breaths and try and flush everything that you were doing just before you came on this call, and just let it go, because there's nothing you can do about it for the next hour. So just take a time and breathe. And try and become aware of your arms just relaxed on your thighs, on your knees. Just try and become aware of the back of your head, back of the shoulders, the lower back. And kind of feel the strength of your spine holding you up. And breathe. We'll just take another 30 seconds. So if you've been able to do that exercise, that's what it feels like to be centered, to be grounded, to be present, to be in the body and not necessarily letting our head take us many other places except this moment. Just ask yourself, how much of your time in your day do you spend in this state? Is it a state you're used to? Is it a state that you very rarely enter? So slowly open your eyes. And let me share a few ideas with you. Decision making. This is what I do for a living. I'm a strategic planning consultant, and I spend most of my time with management teams taking big decisions. Strategic plans are just a series of big decisions where the consequences are high, the timeline is long, that we may not know whether we took a good decision until 2 years, 3 years down the road. And so these are the kind of questions that keep people awake at night. What should I do? What should we do? Where should this organization go? How should I run this project, et cetera, et cetera. And the most important thing that is a prerequisite of taking a good decision is that people are present. They're not thinking about other things. They're not thinking about COVID. They're not thinking about things at home. They're not thinking about other projects, that they're really concentrating and present around the decisions we've got to take. And obviously, when we're taking decisions, gathering information, analyzing it is an important element of decision making. We do that for most important decisions that we take. Coming up, being creative, thinking out of the box, brainstorming, et cetera, again, is a key part of determining whether we will come up with something new, whether we'll come up with an innovation, etc. The actual decision-making process that we use, and as I said earlier, I'm going to share one with you today. There's many, but if we don't use the right decision-making process, we'll probably come up with the wrong results. Just like if we use the wrong manufacturing process, we'll come up with the wrong product. And finally, if we don't follow up and build accountability and some kind of monitoring evaluation system in, the decision won't get implemented, right? And then we've wasted our time in that decision-making process. And most decision-making strategic decisions are taken with these 4 elements really in the mind's eye of the decision maker, saying we've got to get the right information, we need to come up with some ideas. Am I doing this right? And how am I going to make sure this change happens? But in actual fact, all these models and decision-making processes, they exist around the world. What's going to make the difference as to whether you use them differently, whether you get the best out of them? It actually ends up being you, the person. And each of us is an individual. So we each use these models, we each gather information, we each try and be creative, we each follow up in a different way depending on who we are. And that's what makes the difference between your success and rising up the ladder by taking good decisions and seeing them get implemented, or potentially taking bad decisions or not seeing good decisions implemented, and we kind of get left behind by those that rise up. So we're going to examine today, yes, I'm going to show you one decision-making process, but we're going to focus a lot more on you or me, right, as the decision maker, which is ultimately going to play a major component in whether we end up being successful or not. Now, if you're interested in art, you can go to an art gallery and you can see paintings. And I could go to the Louvre, I could go to the Met, I could go to all kinds of different art galleries, and see an amazing array of paintings. I can also take lots of courses. I could take a watercolor class, I could take a sculpture class, etc., etc. There's lots of courses available around art. But does that turn me into an artist? Somebody who can take a blank piece of paper or a piece of clay and mold it into something exceptional. I could have gone to I have been to lots of museums, I have been to lots of art galleries, but I'm not a great artist. So where does that image, that sculpture, that piece of music, where's it come from? Right? It comes from somewhere inside of me, the essence of me. I have something to say, right? Now, as a project manager, same kind of thing. I can measure your results. It might be financial, it might be whether you deliver, etc., etc. There's lots of ways I can measure your output. There's also lots of project leadership, project management courses, etc., etc., as how to do such and such. But who are you as a project manager? If you're working with a team of 10 people reporting to you, you can have the best process, you can have the best KPIs or OKRs, etc., etc. But it's ultimately you, right? Who are you? And that's tough work to do, right? Taking a course is easy. Looking yourself in the mirror and trying to be different and seeing what's working and not working is often kind of our blind spot. Because the key moment, the key element in any decision-making process is, yesterday I might have been in a good space, and today I'm not in a good space. Maybe I didn't sleep well. Maybe I have COVID, who knows, right? But I'm going to be different, and I need to be present. I need to be aware of that. And so what we're trying to do in decision-making is get ourselves be present, get access to the best information, use the best processes, but a lot of it's going to come down to us. And part of it is being aware of your own state in real time. How am I at this moment, giving this presentation to people mainly in Atlanta, Georgia, or down in Georgia who work for Georgia Tech? I'm in Montreal. How am I? If I'm thinking about other things, if I'm not fully present, then I'm going to miss out a lot of information that potentially it can make me give you a better workshop. So yes, I can listen to my brain. I've been trained for 20, 30 years. I've got degrees, etc. I've trained that very well. But what's my heart saying? Because if I want to get buy-in to decisions, engagement, commitment, I want to get my team rallied behind a decision, that's often not intellectual. It's all about, can I capture their heart, their buy-in, be part of a team, a winning team, whether it's hockey, NFL, or whatever. It's a lot more about than knowing the plays. It's about feeling part of a team and being aware of, we talk about gut decisions. What did your gut tell you? I took a gut decision. And we can often feel things in our body, in our hearts, that actually scientifically we feel it before it goes to our head. Our head interprets what's happening in our body. But many of us are not listening to it. So my head says one thing, my heart says another, my gut feels kind of queasy, my body wants to do something else, and potentially if I give it the leadership, it might do something else, and it just doesn't feel right because I'm not coherent between those three. Now, as I say, I can cut off my head, but if I listen to my heart, there's actually lots of information coming from there, chemicals that go up to the brain. Same thing with my gut. Neurons, neurochemicals, we literally call it the gut brain. And often people are more comfortable taking gut decisions than taking a decision when it doesn't feel right in your stomach. And again, that communication is going through your spinal column up to your brain. The brain is important. Oops. I don't neglect it. But if I only rely on the brain, I'm missing out potentially on 2/3 of important information that will help me take a better decision or not. So I promised you we'll bring these two ideas together in a few minutes, but I'm going to show you a model that a decision-making model I came up with. It's based on work by Michael Mankins. You can Google Michael Mankins and find lots of articles he's written in Harvard Business Review, etc., about decision making. But I like to think I took a lot of his work and kind of nailed it and simplified it into what's the best decision making process we can use for kind of big decisions. So first thing is make sure we're asking the right question. We can waste a lot of time not asking the right question. And what I'd like you to do now is just write down a question where you kind of feel stuck. It could be a personal question, it could be a work question, but it's something that you just feel kind of, you don't know where to go, you don't know which route to take, and you're stuck. You don't know what to do. Just write it down. I'll give you 15 seconds. Just write down a problem, a question where you just don't know how to move forward. So just park that, put that aside for a minute or two. And we'll come back to the Mankins. And what does Michael Mankins say about this question? Well, what we should do basically, if we're working particularly in a team, we should distribute all the information that we have on that problem to everybody who's going to be involved and get them to read it. And then we hold a meeting. And the first meeting says, well, what information? This is the information we've got, but what are we missing? So we have kind of optimum. I used perfect in the sense that we've got everything we could possibly get, because we don't want to look back further in the process and said, if only we'd done this, we should have researched this, we should have got this information, we should have analyzed this. So that first meeting, the only thing that comes out of it is research to-dos, research activities. People go off and get the information that we've identified that we're missing, that we really need to take the best decision possible. So people do the research, we distribute that information, and that in essence is the best information we can get. It's not perfect, it never will be, but it is the best. And then we come to our second meeting. And in this meeting, we're in a very different mode. In the first meeting, we're analyzing, etc. In this meeting number 2, we're taking all that information, the brains in the room that were involved in this decision-making process, and say, by the end of this meeting, we have to come up with 3 alternative solutions. Why 3? Because again, the human being is, if we have a problem, as soon as we come up with a solution, let's just do it now and get on to my next problem. But when we're trying to be world class, best in class, the best university, etc., we can't afford to come up with okay decisions. We need to have the best decision. So if we force ourselves to come up with 3 different alternatives, not 1 that's really good and 2 that are okay, but 3 that are really good, 3 ways of solving this problem, 3 ways we could move forward, then somewhere amongst those three, based on the perfect information we have, the best people we've put together on this, these are the best 3 we could come up with as a team. So by the end of that meeting, during the meeting, we may generate 10 or 20 ideas, and by the end, we narrow it down to 3. And then we build kind of the business case for those. We analyze them in more detail. We might do financials. We might do some project scoping. What's the Gantt chart? All those kind of good things, in order that we've thoroughly looked at each of those 3 alternatives. And again, we distribute those business cases to everybody involved in the decision. And then we come back to our 3rd meeting, and then the decision is taken. There's no reason not to, because we've come up with the 3 best alternatives we could come up with. We've analyzed them in detail, the pros and cons, the financials, the project management issues of each. We can present them, and then there's no reason to not take a decision except procrastination and fear. So Dr. Grack is a way of building in accountability that I can share with you in slides afterwards. But basically, that's what the Mankins 3x3 says. It says, we have 3 meetings and we always come up with 3 alternatives. There is never a 4th meeting. There's no reason to have a 4th meeting. So I had one of my clients who said, listen, this is great, but I can't take a few weeks or even a few days between meeting number 1 and meeting number 2 in order to take a decision. And this was an auto parts manufacturer, and they said, we get a call from Ford at 8 o'clock in the morning and they want an answer by the end of the day. So the solution was to make it 3 by 1. We still come up with 3 alternatives, but we only basically have 1 meeting. But in, let's say at 9 o'clock in the morning, we start working, and for the first few hours till 11:30, all we do is get all the information we need that we could possibly take into account to get an answer back to Ford. And by 11 o'clock, we've got most of the information, we've analyzed it, we've got the perfect information we could have for that decision. We take a quick break, we come back, and now we're in brainstorming mode. Based on this information, based on what Ford wants, what might we do? And we brainstorm and we analyze, and we might spend an hour or 2 looking at those. And then we come up with 3 ways we can get back to Ford to solve their problem. We spend another couple of hours analyzing each of those, again, financial feasibility, all those kind of things. And by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we have got the best possible answer we could have for Ford by the end of the day. It's not perfect, but it is the best. Now, there are 4 body dispositions. This is where we get into the fun part. We've experimented with being at center right at the beginning of this session. And now, obviously, our body can be in many different dispositions. But for the sake of this exercise, we're going to say there's 4 different dispositions: stability, openness, flexibility, and resolution. So stability is represented by, I always, as you've probably noticed by my accent, I'm from England, the Queen personifies stability. The royal family, to a great extent in English society, represents stability. We can have different prime ministers, we can have World War II, we can have all kinds of things going on, Mrs. Thatcher, Boris, etc. But long as the Queen is there, there is stability. This might not be true with the next generation of the royals, but it's certainly true with the Queen. Stability is a very important body disposition. She personifies it. Openness is I'm warm and welcoming. I look people in the eyes with a smile, and I really engage with them. I'm very present with them. I'm open. My arms are kind of open. Flexibility is I'm not kind of stuck. I'm not trying to convince people. I'm willing to take risks. I'm even willing to look foolish or say or do something wrong. And resolution is I'm determined. I'm moving. Nothing's going to stop me. I'm going to deliver on this project. And you may have noticed as I just described those 4 body dispositions, my voice changed. My actual body disposition changed. So what I'd like to do, if we can, is I'd like to see some people on video, so on screen, so I can see you. Any volunteers? At the moment, I can only see Andrina.
There are several folks who have shared their video, Mark.
Okay.
You may need to go out of presenter mode to see faces.
Unfortunately, I don't seem to be able to do that, but anyway, no problem. What we'll do, I'm going to invite you to stand up. I will just play with Andrina at the moment because I can
All
see
right.
you.
Well,
So
they're
please,
participating. You have some
good.
good sports. They're
Great.
participating.
Well, the only way you can kind of sense into this is by actually participating. So let's, if you've got a little bit of space, it's nice to move around as opposed to just look at the camera. And hopefully, I'll just move my ball out of the way for a second. Hopefully you can see me. So
We see you.
let's think about stability and just try and sense into what does stability feel like for you? What does your body feel like? Is it relaxed? Is it tense? Is it light? Is it heavy? Are your feet flat on the ground? Can you really feel the ground? What's your mental state when you're in stability? It's tough to be anxious, actually, when you're in stability, when your body is in stability. And what I'd like you to do, I'm just going to walk. I have a little bit of space here. I'm just going to walk very slowly because stability is really slow. It's stable. I'm not jumping around. I'm just sensing what stability feels like. Imagine you're the queen and you've got all sorts of family problems and you've got to meet with Boris Johnson and you just need to keep your calm. And again, just ask yourself, is this a body disposition that you are comfortable with, familiar with? So then just come to a halt. Now this is a bit more difficult, particularly when you can't see anybody on a screen, but now think of openness. Imagine there's other people, imagine there's friends in the room with you, or you're actually probably no colleagues on the call now. So just imagine they're there and you're kind of being open, your face is smiling, you're being warm, and then just walk around a little bit in openness. And how is it different? Imagine you're greeting friends, giving them high fives, etc. Maybe giving them a hug without getting into sexual harassment issues. But if they want a hug, you can give them a hug. And you're smiling, even for people you may not particularly like, but you're making an effort, you're engaging with them. And you may notice there's a little bit more lightness in your movement, maybe a little bit quicker. Your body is different. Think of a loved one. Imagine you're meeting your partner or your best friend, you're in the street and you see them come in. We have a very different disposition. You might feel actually a smile coming to your face, a warmth, because we're open, we're engaging. Now the next one is a fun one, because the next one is flexibility. And this one we're going to take to, unfortunately, you can see me, but I can't see you. So I'm going to be dancing around in flexibility, willing to make a fool of myself. So this is a challenge for all of you. Now, make a fool of yourself. Just go to your extreme and let yourself go. Dance around a bit. You're used to dancing. Just let yourself be loose, flexible. Don't worry, that's it. Dance around and just push it a little bit. Do something that you never usually do. Be willing to make a fool of yourself. Right? You just brush your hair. Do a Boris Johnson impression with your hair. Just let your hair stand up. And you'll probably feel a different energy now. And just stop. How does your body feel now? And finally, resolution. Resolution is you are determined. Nothing is going to stop you. So a bit more of a military. My chest is up, my back straight, I'm tense, and I'm kind of walking with determination. Right? My step is much heavier. You are determined to get to that plane on time. You're late to get to the airport. You're rushing. You've got to get that report to your boss by 5 o'clock and it's late. You have to get it done. Project managers, when they have to deliver on something, they are determined. Your breathing may be different, your body may be different, your thoughts may be different. And then just come to a halt. And just sense into how you feel in disposition of resolution. Now come back to center. Remember that feeling of center? Just close your eyes and breathe. Just take a few deep breaths. And then I'll invite you to take your seats again. So, again, let me just share my screen. And let's look at that in kind of a little bit more detail. You felt it. Now let's look at kind of some images of it and how we can apply it to that model of Mankind's 3x3. So this is stability. Stability, being like the queen and not getting upset, etc., when something happens, is important in, project team meetings. Everything's kind of, the tempers are getting raised, the heat's getting up, and people are starting to bicker amongst themselves. And if somebody can just represent stability, it can change the entire thing. The dynamic can be completely different because you can bring stability into it. Alternatively, openness, right? Again, this is classic kind of chest open, arms open, willing to shake hands, going around cocktails, etc., greeting people. And again, when you're working, I mentioned the idea of how can we be open with people we don't like, who always have opposite opinions to us. But when we're in a decision-making process, if we're not open to them, they won't be open to us. Flexibility, there's the idea of the kind of flexibility you see here, but in actual fact, when we talk about creativity in innovation, people talk about, there's no wrong answers and in brainstorming mode, but often the challenge of creativity and innovation is taking that risk in a meeting to actually say something that people might laugh at, to challenge the status quo, to look ridiculous and feel ridiculous. But if you as project manager don't do it, your project team won't either. So if we try and stay looking our position as opposed to risking looking foolish by saying something crazy, forget innovation, forget creativity. It's not going to happen. And that's not because of the data. It's not because of the process. It's because of you. Resolution. when we need to deliver that project, sometimes it's really important to get into resolution. And maybe if we're not delivering, we need to look at ourselves. Why are we struggling with resolution and determination and getting it done? And of course, center. You know, I always used to use Usain Bolt as an example of, you know, he was the fastest man in the world, but if the beginning of the 100 meters, if he was thinking about what he's going to have for supper tonight, or even what's going to happen in Russia and Ukraine, he's not going to win the race, right? The idea of being present, even as someone as talented, you know, the GOAT of 100 meters, if he's not present, it's not going to happen, if he's not centered. So the idea of center, and you can see literally it's in the center of these 4 dispositions. So stability is I am calm, openness is I am welcoming, flexibility is I'm changing and changeable, and resolution is I'm determined. But if we're in center, what we're trying to do is we can get easily to either openness, to stability, resolution, flexibility as it's needed. We're not stuck in any of them. We come back to center. Just like on a squash court, if you hit the ball, what do? You go back to center and then go after the ball again. And it's that same idea. If we can't get back to center, we don't even know what it feels like, then we struggle to have access to the other 4. And obviously, there's an opposite to the being calm is I'm the person who loses it. And maybe on your project team, you're known as the person who loses it. Or maybe you're known as being closed to people, to ideas, etc. Maybe you're seen as being, they're stuck in their ways, tough to change their mind. And resolution, the opposite is procrastinating, not delivering. So I'm losing it. We kind of see it in films. We learn it very young, you know. It's like literally you're the person who loses it. I'm closed to broccoli or to people. I'm stuck. I've built myself such a little box in which I can function. Or I'm the school mom who it has to be my way or the highway. Or procrastinating. So, again, back to center. Are we present or are we absent? Are we the kind of semi-invisible man? And there is Usain Bolt, present. An actor, if they're not present, they're not going to deliver. So the question would be, when do you fall into the red? Are you somebody who loses it? Or do people on your team see you as being closed? Are you seen as being stuck? And do you not always deliver? Do you procrastinate? And just ask yourself, we all find it easier to get into some of those dispositions as opposed to others. Which are difficult for you to get into? Is there 1 or 2 that you've come to rely on? I know for myself, I was an engineer, I was used to delivering, I was taught to deliver. So being in resolution was seen to be a real attribute, and it is, right? The problem is, if I'm stuck in resolution, I'm always in resolution, I can't get to openness, flexibility, or stability. And I know for myself personally, going to a cocktail and networking and glad handing, as we call it, and shaking people's hand and making small talk, that is not easy for me to do. But sometimes I need to do it. It takes more energy for me to do it. But sometimes it's a matter of me relaxing my body and just moving into that space. It's a real challenge, but I can do it. But I can only do it if I'm aware of it. And when you look at the Mankins 3x3, and I will kind of open this up for discussion, those 4 different dispositions, when we're looking for the question, when we're bringing people together in that first meeting, when we're doing brainstorming, and when we're taking the decision, we need those 4 different dispositions. So anybody like to speak up? And when do you think those 4 dispositions are needed during that process at the different stages? Anybody like to share?
Well, I'll share, Mark. This is Adrena. I think for meeting one, being flexible is really an attribute in that type of meeting where we're just trying to figure out what we know and maybe what we don't know.
What else might be useful in meeting number 1?
I think maybe the resolution, the person who's like, we have to get this done, even though, you know, kind of parsing all the information, you may not have a clear path or clear understanding of what you have or what's missing, but someone who's going to sort of stay the course and encourage people to just participate in a meeting like that. I could imagine that that type of meeting could be a struggle for folks who just kind of want a more defined, a more narrow path to making a decision.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Anybody else?
someone,
Yeah.
well, someone added in the chat, just being open to new ideas and information.
Yeah, I mean that in that first meeting, often particularly when you're bringing stakeholders into the process and there's new people and they don't know each other, etc., and it's a kind of a virtual or a skunk works team that's put together to solve a particular question. Sometimes actually, I mean, the person driving the process, owning the question or the problem, if they're too in decision-making mode or driving forward, it's not actually the right disposition. It might be to identify the question, but the most important thing right at the beginning of that meeting is to make everybody feel welcome as part of the process, as an equal participant, and not that it's a win-lose type of engagement. And even the physical setup of the room, you know, can be a predeterminant of this. You know, how do you create a space where it feels open, it feels warm, it feels welcoming? So you can look at the physical space, the room, but you can also look at yourself. Do you get up and welcome people, or are you sitting at the head of the table, right? It sends a very strong message. So the actual fact, the openness at the beginning is really key. And then you might, as you move forward and start gathering information, you might move more into the resolution mode, trying to define who's going to do what, etc., etc. But if you're not present and you're not really aware of the other people in the room, you're not going to be able to do that. And a lot of those signals are going to come from your heart and your gut if you are listening, because your head is just focused on, I need to get this question solved, right? I need to get the information. You may be sending the complete wrong message, in a sense, to the other people or some of the people in the room who are key stakeholders. Meeting number 2, which body disposition do you think is really crucial for for number 2? I'm not asking Andrina, I'm asking anyone on the call. If your mouth's not full, you can answer.
Hi, I just unmuted. This is Alina. In the second meeting, I think flexibility and creativity, being open to people's ideas. This would be the place where maybe the team leader could encourage everyone to speak up, even those who may be a little bit shy of contributing. This is really the time to make the space very open, but also a time to drive that creative thinking and get as many options on the table as possible.
Yeah, and the idea of, if you want people to come up with crazy ideas in a brainstorming session, you have to be a role model for that, right? And although the idea of physically dancing around may be a bit of a push, the real challenge is, are you willing to look foolish? Are you willing to say something that people laugh at, or people think are strange, or we don't, you know, goes against the principles of we don't do that here, right? Where's that come from? Why is he acting like that? Why is he saying that? And again, just in that meeting, being used to, you know, in a lot of those types of meeting number 2, we play with Lego and things like that. I mean, again, you can research Lego and the concept of simple play, but if you're not willing to play, then your team's not willing to play. And I mean, play is kind of childlike and funny and etc. etc. It's really is flexibility personified. But if you're trying to come up with 3 best solutions, most creative, innovative ones, if you can't get access to that space, and if you're sitting there straight in a suit and tie and sitting in a big chair behind a big table, it's not going to happen. So number 3, we're taking a decision, we're following up, we're managing the deliverables. Which body disposition do you think is most valuable there?
You'd want to be more driven because you're driving towards a conclusion.
Yeah, this is when resolution, now I'm not open, now I'm not welcoming, now we're taking a decision now, right? And it's very much, I mean, as soon as I start talking about that, my voice does change, my posture changes, because now it's like, we got to deliver. And again, if you can't get into that mode authentically, right, you're not playing a role. It really is, this is who I am for this particular question. Then maybe whatever decision is taken in that last meeting just disappears, it evaporates, right? It never gets implemented. So as we move around the 3x3 or the 3x1, we need to we come back to center, but in real time, we're assessing in each of those meetings, how do I create the most value in order to get to the decision that's going to get implemented? And again, if we're not listening to our bodies and fully present and taking all that information that is potentially there or not, right? If we're just cut off at our necks, and this is an accusation that is thrown around universities, and again, I work in a university, so I know we're just heads walking around on a machine, right? That takes us from one meeting to another. Because the intellect is so strong there, it doesn't mean that's going to be the best decision. Unless we can use the right process, unless we can get into use our body and voice and body language, etc., we won't get there. And stability. When do you think stability is, I kind of mentioned it earlier, when do you think stability is most valuable?
Shouldn't it be throughout all?
Exactly. Sometime it might be at the beginning when people are saying, oh, in meeting number 1, oh, we don't have time to get that, it's not worth getting that. Or in meeting number 2, when somebody starts saying, no, that's not a good idea, and people start, the temperature in the room starts to rise. Maybe at that moment, you need to be able to bring stability into the space. And if you're somebody who that doesn't come naturally to, then it's going to take energy. It's going to take awareness, because otherwise you'll be escalating as well. And I sometimes, say in discussions, as soon as we start exaggerating, as soon as we start generalizing, as soon as people start making it personal, it's like, that's when we need, somebody's got to bring some stability into this space. And I know that you might even, you might have seen this in your own project. Sometimes we want people on the project team, not because of their expertise, but just because when they're in the dialogue, they kind of change the energy in the space. They can bring stability in, or they can bring flexibility and creativity into the space because they're willing to be laughed at. So putting that team together is a challenge as well for project teams or decision-making teams. And just ask yourself, what do you bring? Which of those 4 dispositions do you bring into the decision-making process or the project team? And the first step is becoming aware of which one of these really are easy for us, which ones are hard, which one we've learned to rely on, and just start recognizing if we get back to center and start trying to open the door, the channel to get into those. I mean, again, I go back, it's not just 4 dispositions, there's lots of dispositions, but just those 4 will give you an enormous amount of headway in terms of being a better project team leader, being a better decision maker, getting things implemented. Any? Ah, I see a few people now. Good. Any more questions? Okay, I have one more slide. I'm not even going to show it to you, but it says, what would happen if we let our body lead our decision making and we listen to it? This is a real step into the unknown, right? Because hopefully the body dispositions you can resonate with, but normally it's our head that leads. But what happens if we let our body lead? So I'm going to give you a quick example because time is almost up. But I'm going to start, if you can put me on full screen, or actually, if you want to put me on full screen, I wrote down a question. I'm stuck, right? I'm stuck on a question. There's something I have to decide. What am I going to do? I don't know what to do about a situation. And my head is just giving me more and more alternatives. It's just driving me crazy. But what happens if I let my body lead and see what it has to say? I'm just going to do this and you can observe and then you can give me feedback afterwards. Now, I don't know whether you can see that. I'm going to move so you might be able to see it. What does that say to you? Shout it out so I can hear you.
I don't see anything.
I don't see anything.
I'm not seeing you, Mark. I'm sorry.
Oh, that didn't work. Why not?
I think your camera's off.
My camera goes off automatically.
Okay, there you are now, Mark.
I see you now.
Okay, let's try. Well, we're basically up for time, but okay, I can just reproduce. I'm not sure I can reproduce that. I think it was like that. What do you see? Trouble.
A unicorn.
That's a thinker.
A unicorn. Frustration.
Ache.
Ache.
Might have a migraine.
Migraine. Now you can probably observe that this position is not actually sustainable. So I'm going to stop talking for a second.
Collapse. Crumbling.
Oh, is that a yoga move?
Yoga. Maybe stretch. Yeah.
Your head's in the sand, stretching.
Actually, I'm not sure you can see me.
We see you now, Mark.
Exactly.
Flexibility.
We saw it.
But it's the only way you can appreciate this is by actually trying it. Because it really is, as opposed to letting the head analyze things, etc. You say, if there is so much information being processed in my gut and in my heart and in my body, then if I let that lead, maybe I can get different perspectives and get unstuck. And to be honest, even having done that exercise for 2 minutes, I feel different about the situation that I was thinking about. It doesn't mean I've got a solution, but I've tuned into my body, and all of a sudden I've got movement. I don't feel as stuck. And there's a lot of theory on this. I can share it with this. This really comes out of MIT, and I've been practicing this kind of embodied decision making to the extreme of, okay, if we shut that off and just let our bodies move, what do we get? And we can get feedback from other people. We can feel things differently. It's just a different source of information. But you have to be willing, as some of you are probably laughing at me, you've got to be willing to get into flexibility and risk looking foolish. Otherwise, it will never work. Okay, hopefully you enjoyed that. If you have any questions, I'm still here. And about Mankins, about the 4 body dispositions, about what you just half witnessed, at least when the camera worked. So I'm still here.
This was wonderful. Thank you so much, Mark. We appreciate you. As always, we try to deliver programs which give us an opportunity to think a little different and challenge ourselves. And I think you hit the nail on the head with that assignment. I appreciate you so much. As we were talking, I wanted to share with you all, I couldn't find the article. I will look for it and drop it in the chat. You all may remember William Hung from several years ago. He was an American Idol contestant, and he sung She Bangs. And in front of the judges, he was an absolute flop. I was traveling this weekend, and he was on Alabama Public Radio. And the interview was very interesting because in his mind, he just embodied the idea of being flexible enough to flop and to experience the success and challenges that come with that. And he even talked about, childhood experiences, but to sum it all up and not ruin it, he absolutely did not consider that a flop. So I will find that interview and put it in the chat for you. You'll probably get a good laugh, but it will also give you something to think about as you go about your day and your work. As always, we are very appreciative of your time. There is a link to a survey in the chat. When you have a moment, please take opportunity to give us some feedback. We consider this your forum, so we're always open to new ideas and new speakers. So if you have any suggestions, feel absolutely free to share them. You all have a wonderful rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Adrina.
Hi, Mark.
Hi there.
Hi there. Sorry about that. I have a terrible habit of just not letting people say goodbye. And I just hit that button. It's just, I don't know, for some reason, I just always do that when I have a session. I should have warned you about that. But I did want to connect with you, just briefly to say thank you. I think that it was a wonderful one. We don't have to record this. I don't know why that I didn't start a recording. I can stop it. You figure out how to do that. There we go.